Some viewers may find this content disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised. Who dares awaken me from my slumber? The cryptid huntress, aka Jessica Jones, has once again found her way into the fox den for another episode of Midnight Lycanthropy here on StarFox Radio. Yet please allow me to feed. Much better. I enjoy sleeping, yet sometimes you become malnourished when you have slept for the last 100 years. Now that Jessica Jones has released my shackles, it is time for the Midnight Society to take a walk into the darkness. My creatures of the night, yes, welcome back to another episode of Midnight Lycanthropy here on StarFox Radio. This is the home and meeting ground of the Midnight Society, and Jessica Jones, aka the Cryptid Huntress, has once again stopped in to hang out with us. Jessica, how are you doing, my friend?
Hey, I'm doing great. How have you been, my friend?
I have been pretty busy, but until I saw how busy you were, I guess I realized I wasn't as busy as I thought I was, but I'm doing really good. How are you?
Oh man, yeah, I've been ripping and running this past couple of weeks. I've been doing some. I did a little bit of field research. I'm actually going to be doing some field research coming up here in the next couple of days, out in the field. But you know me, I stay busy on the grind, doing shows and interviewing people just like you do, and learning more. And yeah, I just had a really interesting show I did earlier today where we were talking about something that is just so mind blowing. And it was about a the Kentucky meat shower of like 1876. It's just the oddest thing I've ever heard of, and where a woman was outside doing chores. I guess she was making some soap outdoors on her farm in Kentucky, and meat started falling from the sky. And it's just been a mystery for well over 100 years now, like 150 years. It's just been a complete mystery as to what that meat was and where did it come from. And we were kind of diving into that topic today. And somebody asked at some point, they in my chat, they said, do you think that if there were dogmen on that property, let's just say, I mean, it was just a hypothetical question, right? But somebody in the chat said, do you think that there could have been a point then or even now where some kind of agency, whoever's in charge of dogmen, let's say if there is some kind of program, what if they're airdropping meat from the sky into farmlands and stuff to feed their assets? And I thought, man, that was actually a really interesting question. I just thought I'd mention it tonight. I know it doesn't have a lot to do with the topic of the other stuff we're going to be talking about, but it could, you know, um, airdropping meat, beef, some kind of strange mystery meat into the environment to feed the dogmen.
Wow, that's some gnarly stuff right there for sure. And as I was thinking about that when you were mentioning that, there's really only a couple scenarios that could have actually been, like you said, maybe a transportation of some sort of meat plane where it was delivering it to either the civilians and it maybe blew out a door or something and that happened, or as you stated, it was potentially being deployed. I actually also recently heard of a really bizarre case where somewhere in the Amazon there was a humpback whale that was legit like in the middle of the jungle, and these people are like, what the heck? How did this get here? And the final conclusion of it was there had been an eruption of a volcanic explosion inside of the ocean that apparently, unfortunately for this whale, it had been cooked as it was blasted when this eruption occurred, but it had traveled so far that it ended up landing inside of this area located near the Amazon. And it's just bizarre. But then when you actually listen to the breakdown and understand the trajectory ratio, it's like, wow, that makes sense. So those would be the only three conclusions, I guess, that I could have come to. Maybe a geyser or something could have blown up and blown some cows up, or it was potentially purposely being deployed or accidentally.
Yeah, I mean, or it could have been dropped from the sky. Okay, I know this world is so wacky, so wild. There's just some things that just defy explanation. We don't know what happened or how they got there. But back in 1876, there was 100% a whole community that experienced this. It's actually a woman and her son, I believe. They were hanging out and meat started falling from the sky, and I mean, that how do you explain that? And you know what's wild is that some of the guys from town came in, and they were trappers and hunters, and they ended up eating the meat and tasting it, and none of them could figure out what this meat was. And they were all, um, arguing over like what kind of meat this was. Some of them thought it was mutton, or um, it was tested by scientists. Actually, they sent it off to labs, to some scientists who determined that it was either, I think they said a sheep or a human. Human. I mean, it was
Oh,
actually could have been human meat, which is just crazy, right? Super crazy. But it was when we were talking about the human meat aspect of it. Someone did ask, well, could this have been, not to say that the had some kind of program where they were dealing with dog men back in the 1800s, but I mean, who knows at this point? I don't even know.
did we even have, actually, now that I'm thinking of it, capabilities to consistently fly in 1876, you said, more or less? I mean, I don't even, when was the first airplane built? And if it was, I mean, that also is interesting too. It seems like maybe you would have needed an air balloon, I guess, if it
Oh,
was to have been deployable, and then someone would have spotted the air balloon. So that brings even some more mystery, I suppose.
yeah, well, we had hot air balloons and airships. So airships is something that I think a lot of people should be looking into. I know we're here to talk about Dogman tonight, but we did talk about the airships aspect, and airships have been around for centuries. Okay, like the
So that could be
Hindenburg kind
above the
of, but
clouds, kind of, I guess, then to drop some stuff. Okay, yeah.
yeah. So our history is not what we're taught, and I'm going to leave it at that. Okay.
Uh, no, that makes a lot of sense right there. And before I toss the mic back to you, yeah, no, for sure, that's actually a great observation right there. I mean, a blimp of some sorts would be quieted enough, and I mean, if it could, say, disguise itself in the clouds as it went over an area, yeah, that really does, make a lot of sense as to being something that could have occurred, I suppose, for sure. Yeah, as you said, it's really bizarre with some of the things that occur like that, and there's really no explanation. So,
Yeah, especially in the 1800s, right? It's it's wild, but up to the present moment, we're having I've gotten some reports from my good friend. His name's Brown Dwarf. He's been on my show several times. He's got a fantastic YouTube channel called Brown Dwarf, actually. And he is a fellow Bigfoot and cryptid field researcher based out of Oregon and California. He's currently living in Los Angeles, He and his brother have a skate shop out there in downtown LA. He's got his ear to the street. Okay. And so he gets all of the information from people that come in. I guess a lot of people know that he is a cryptid field researcher. He does a lot of boots on the ground field research. Recently, he was up at Bluff Creek on a 9-day hike with a bunch of guys, also that are Bigfoot field researchers. But he delves into the Dogman phenomenon as well, because just like myself, when we're out in the field doing our research, we have to keep an open mind. There's a lot more out there than just Bigfoot. There's also dogmen, and in that area, I have several friends who live out in California who have had dogman encounters, including Javier and his cousin, and also Adolf out in the Fresno area. There's a lot of dogman activity out there, and Javier's been on my show several times talking about his encounter with a gigantic dogman, very muscular. It was wearing shorts. It actually had clothing on. And so it is established that out in this area that I'd like to talk about with you tonight, where homeless people have been getting attacked by dogmen. It's highly suspected that dogman is the culprit of some of these disappearances and some of these attacks. Brown Dwarf actually had a gentleman who was a customer in his shop that came through a couple weeks ago, telling him about his own personal encounter out in the what they call the wash. Okay, they call it the wash. I don't know if it's like a creek, a river, a drainage ditch, something like that. But they're seeing dogmen in these washes out in California, running through the orchards and throughout these areas where there are homeless camps.
Yikes, that's some straight up nightmare stuff. And I've vaguely heard of that, and that's why I really wanted you to dive into that. And that reminds me of some of the older reports of some of the homeless that were using the railroad systems going missing in Michigan and being found like ripped apart as well. And I believe that was around the turn of the century, give or take. So it was a minute ago. But yeah, that's some creepy stuff right there. How do you personally feel about all that?
Well, it's pretty heartbreaking. It's really sad because it's already people who are down on their luck, people who don't have a home anymore. The homeless population in California has just gone through the roof. Okay, there's so many people that are just down and out, hard times. The economy is just terrible, and people are losing their homes on a mass scale. And the gentleman actually that talked to Brown Dwarf, and Brown Dwarf actually has an interview with this guy. And he showed up. His name's Jesus or Jesus. I'm not sure how he pronounces it, but he was in my chat the night that I brought Brown Dwarf on my show to talk about this. He said that he is in a transition phase as well. So he sleeps in his truck at times. And so that's how he had this encounter that he had, was that he's a blue collar worker. I think he does welding. He was out sleeping in his truck one night near one of these washes, and something came up to his truck and was taunting him in the window of his truck. And he said that he had a machete, according to what Brown Dwarf says. He had a machete. Now, I'm not exactly sure if he ever rolled the window down or opened the door or unlocked his door. I doubt it. I hope not. He did say something about this creature was drooling on his window, he said. Now, what he said was going on, he didn't describe it as a dogman, though. Okay, so what he described was more like a pell crawler, but it's in the area where these dogman attacks are happening. Alleged dogman attacks. Now, people are getting attacked. That is the truth. But what is attacking them? That's the question. Okay, so there were thousands and thousands of homeless people in downtown Los Angeles and the San Bernardino area, in that county. But the governor recently signed some legislation. He signed a bill to clean out the streets and to get the homeless camps out of the downtown areas and the downtown districts. So they had task force that went in, and they started sending the people outside the city into the rural areas, out into the desert, according to what Brown Dwarf told me. He said they've been sent out they've been displaced now. They've already just been displaced. They don't have homes. Okay. But now they're displaced even further out of the cities. So they're setting up camps in these isolated desert areas. And so it leaves them very vulnerable to being attacked, and no one even knowing about it by the creatures and the critters out there out in the woods, or let's just say the desert, I guess, because the state has gone in and completely plowed and cleared the land where those homeless once lived. Not only that, but it's not just homeless people out there. There's prisoners being released into these areas. The people who are homeless, a lot of them do have mental instability issues, some of them, and a lot of them have drug addictions as well. And so it's just a recipe for not a good environment, okay, for people to have to be living in those conditions and stuff. But they're saying that a lot of bodies have been being found in these areas, and where the homeless encampments have moved from the cities into these desert locations near the wash. Over a dozen women's bodies have surfaced and have been found mauled, according to the reports that I've gotten. Now, like I said, the person who Brown Dwarf did do that interview with, he said that what he encountered at his truck was not human. It was more like it looked like a female. Did not look like it wasn't necessarily a dog man, but it would be more like a skinwalker or like a pale crawler type of a being. He said that it was grotesque, had weird teeth, it was growling, and it licked his window, or it slobbered on his window. Something very similar to what Drewski with Cryptid Warfare. He's on. We're on a team together. He and the guys actually encountered a pale crawler out in a cave that we were at doing an investigation. I'm familiar with pale crawlers, okay, and skinwalkers as well. That was a skinwalker cave that we were investigating out there. Now, of course, we have to factor in the whole, people that have been living on the streets for a while, or some people might be reverting back to being like animalistic. Brown was saying that a lot of the people that they're encountering that live on the streets are covered in soot, like they've been living underground. That's another thing, that there are homeless populations that are living potentially like in the sewer systems and stuff, like underneath the city. And with the addictions and mental health issues and stuff like that, it does, let's just put it out there on the table, it does kind of open humans, your vessel, up to demonic possession. If you're doing drugs and you're on a low vibration like that out of your circumstances, there's a chance that there could be some demonic possession stuff going on, stuff like that. I don't know, it doesn't have a lot to do with the Dogman phenomenon, but let's just say there's just a really dark energy out there. Okay, dark energy. It's almost like could be more likely to be potentially a hunting ground for things like dogmen. Let's just say, easy targets. Okay, easy targets, sitting ducks, people that don't have, what are they, if they're in a tent, what is that? It's like when I'm out in the field with my team and I sleep in my tent, and it's like a little tiny piece of nylon, separating you and the creatures out there. So these people are probably easy targets. There's no 100% proof that it is dogmen that are attacking these people out there, especially the women, and mauling them and stuff, because it seems like there's a whole lot of high strangeness, a whole lot of dark spirits, dark entities out there in these areas. But it's being reported by multiple people, multiple eyewitnesses, that they are seeing dogmen creatures, werewolf-like creatures, out in these washes and running through these orchards. And with my past interviews that I've done on my channel, we have set up we've set up the history. We've not set it up, but we have documented the history of different people having firsthand encounters with dogmen in these areas. Okay, so it is 100% possible, in my opinion, that the people in these homeless camps could be getting attacked by dogmen.
Jeez, Crow, that's again nightmare fuel. And Yeah, when you mentioned the people sleeping under the ground, the mole people, that's some creepy stuff right there for sure. I remember watching an episode of Monster Quest where some of the mole people were talking about the gargantuous rats that they had encountered in New York and stuff. And one of the researchers was under there looking for the guy to speak to him. And yeah, straight up creepy for sure. And then you have all the underground cities that we've built, on top of, which is straight up pretty creepy as well. And when you mention the fact of the machete, I think of the cynocephali. The cynocephali had weapons and things all the time. And yeah, that's super interesting. And William White, as well as some of our other people on our science team, actually have a hypothesis that we're trying to turn into a theory that at points in time, they were a obviously prevalent civilization, yet just like every other great civilization, they fell. So I mean, whether it was Rome, Greece, Egypt, some of the great Chinese dynasties, etc. And now that they're in a smaller population realm, they're going to be more sporadic. But they also, like I said, wear clothing, use weapons, and wear animal skins, and it's just a potentially really interesting aspect.
Yeah, it definitely is for sure. And you mentioned we're talking about the underground aspect of that area, and it is pretty well known that there were underground, like an underground civilization found there. Not, I guess it was in the 40s or the 50s or so. There was a gentleman that was doing some surveying work, and he stumbled across a underground like tunnel system and an entire facility basically underground where some kind of ancient civilization lived. They call it the Lizard People City under Los Angeles. And now, whether you want to say those are like reptilian lizard people or humans who were called lizard people because they were living like lizards underground, that's up to your own decision there. Okay.
Hmm.
They say that there are a lot of like reptilian like people in Los Angeles. Okay, but nonetheless, this is an area of super duper high strangeness, and lots of sightings and reports. In maybe not in downtown Los Angeles, but in the surrounding areas, they do get quite a bit of dogman and werewolf reports in that area.
Creepy stuff again for sure. And I remember hearing about that where the gentleman basically had heard from some of the indigenous cultures that, yeah, these quote unquote reptile people had taken like a bunch of gold and things and put it down in these chambers. And I think what had happened is as he was digging, something happened where the ground was collapsing and they couldn't go fast enough because they were only given a certain amount of point in time, but also it was too dangerous as well. So I think they never were really able to fully discover what was under that area.
Yeah, the people have no clue as to how vast and wild our underground systems are in the United States. When we hear about these deep underground military bases, I mean, I've talked about it plenty of times when we're discussing even dogmen, because in a lot of cases, when dogmen are seen at these national parks, there's usually some sort of a deep underground military base involved in that area, in those national parks. So I think there's a connection there. I think that there's a connection of dogmen and underground bases, facilities, and any kind of caverns and caves and whatever's going on underground. I think that there's a big time connection. And especially if you believe that dogmen in our military and different agencies are involved in coexisting. And I do personally. There's just a whole lot going on underground, and where are people escaping to today? I mean, I've been hearing it. The word on the street is that a lot of people who have like underground bunkers and stuff right now, with all the craziness going on top of the planet, with the cataclysmic hurricanes and flooding and stuff, and whatever else is going on in the world, a lot of people have headed to their bunkers. And that's underground. That's where the safety lies.
Yeah, it's crazy stuff that's occurring for sure, my friend. So, do you think that the cynocephaly and dogmen are different then, or do you think they're one and the same?
I think they're the same, personally. I think they're the same. It could be the same. Um, I think there could be a difference between dogmen and werewolves. I think the
Yeah,
cynocephaly are the dogmen, though. Yeah.
I
Now,
agree. So, yeah, okay.
especially
Yeah.
if they're seen wearing clothing and things like that too. Like Javier said that the dogman that he's encountered more than one dogman, but the one that we've talked about the most had on shorts. I think it was like ripped jean shorts, jorts. Okay, some kind of shorts. And so some people say, well, maybe that was a werewolf. I don't know. I mean, why would a dogman could wear shorts too? I mean, the
Hmm.
cynocephali were known to wear full clothing.
Yeah, and robes and all kinds of things like the Aztec version of dogmen were wearing the same things that the Native Americans were wearing. So, I mean, it would really potentially only make sense that why not? And also, I've heard of cases as bizarre as it sounds, as dogmen taking people's laundry off of their drying laundry outside before. I don't know if it just happened to get caught up in it when it ran off into the forest, or if it really took it. And I've even heard strange things about Sasquatch wearing, furs and things on top of their own fur.
Man, if I catch a dog man stealing my underwear off the clothesline, I tell you what, I'm just kidding. That'll be the day. Okay.
I imagine seeing a dog man doing that, but yeah, no, there was this woman that claimed the same thing as like you were saying with Javier, that it just ended up grabbing like some sort of clothing off of their hanging laundry and ran off with it. And there was other cases of people seeing what looks to be something young, like a sibling of this wearing like clothing, not talking about the Shenango Valley dog boy, but actually like this was over in like Europe and such, which is totally bizarre right there as well, that it didn't look like it was transforming or anything. It just looked like it had like raggedy type clothing and was a furry looking thing acting animalistic and poking in the muddy area like that. So yeah, straight up crazy stuff for sure.
Yeah, that's pretty wild. That's really cool, though. Yeah, I mean, I've gotten plenty of reports of dogmen wearing clothes before, and a while back, I would have immediately said, "Oh, that was definitely a werewolf." That's definitely a werewolf. But now, I don't know. I think dogmen, when you trace the history back, the cynocephali, they those are the dogmen, in my opinion, of today. And
Agreed. I
yeah,
mean, it's pretty much right there. I mean, I don't know what everyone's missing as researchers or historians or whatever. I mean, I don't know how much more transparent it needs to be. Like it's right there.
yeah. Well, there's a difference. I just did a show recently about the Cheyenne Dog Soldiers, and everybody thinks of Cheyenne Dog Soldiers. Those were actually humans who were warriors, the most fierce warriors back in the day. The Cheyenne Dog Men are still around, by the way, but this was the early 1900s, the 1800s. There were just brutal warriors that would stop at nothing to uh, protect their people and get their land back and do whatever they had to do. But they would do things like rituals. Okay, and I've talked about this with my friend Tom Springer was on my show. He is Cheyenne, actually. His heritage is actually Norse and Cheyenne, Native American, and he looks like a Viking. Okay, in person
Hmm.
when you meet him. But he's very knowledgeable on all these topics. And we talked about the Cheyenne Dog Soldiers, and he's talked about the rituals that they would do. And when they would go into battle, I mean, there's a fine line there of like, well, maybe they some say that they turned into werewolves. They literally turn into werewolves. They almost like and I don't want to say skinwalker, okay, but they would do rituals before battle, and it was almost like a blind rage. They go into like a blind rage, kind of just like a berserker. We've talked about berserkers before. Um, it was kind of on that level, but some said like that other people were scared to fight these guys, they saw them coming with their big bonnets of their eagle feathers on their heads. You know, they had a very different headdress than most of the Native American, like the chiefs and stuff. They had this like round bonnet of eagle's feathers or owl feathers. And when you saw them coming, they'd paint their faces like a skull, kind of like, is it Ghost of, is it Call of Duty maybe? Um, the skull face, like the white skull with the black
Mm-hmm.
around it, and had those bonnets. They were terrifying, but some said that they actually turned into werewolves at times when they would fight. So, really super interesting thing to look into, especially anybody who's listening tonight or today. Look into the Cheyenne Dog Men, Dog Soldiers. They might have actually turned into werewolves.
Again, straight up creepy stuff and great knowledge right there. And before we let you go, that reminds me a lot of during World War II and earlier than that as well. I mean, you have some of the SS and just other regular German soldiers that were reporting seeing basically what they thought at first were human or canine like creatures or werewolves, but in actuality, it was some of the Germanic tribes, men's, and people that just didn't agree, obviously, with what was occurring, that were wearing these animal furs and basically acting like guerrilla type warfare, which is super interesting. And then you have the Viking berserkers, and then, the tribe that you just mentioned. So it is interesting because sometimes with translation and history, it's interesting. It leaves a depiction, I guess, aspect to it for sure.
Yeah, it does. It does. But what I find interesting is that throughout history, when people go into battle, they take on the characteristics of animals, of fierce animals, like the wolf, the bear, um, just taking on those characteristics and becoming that. And it's an interesting, almost like a blurred line between like being humanistic, being animalistic, even through ritual and things like that. On the verge of being like a skinwalker type of activity. And he mentioned that they actually, I guess it's a very similar aspect, I guess, of like the Cheyenne Dog Men. When they would go into battle, it was very much being like a berserker, where they put on the pelt of an animal. Actually, too, you put on the pelt and become that animal. Okay, when you're fighting, you embody that animal. You embody the spirit. You embody the fierceness, the savagery of that animal, and that's and Tom also he's in the military. He's actually a sniper in the military, and has done that, and he's had to be in hand to hand combat before, where he said that he's just blacked out because of how savage he had to be in that hand-to-hand combat to stay alive
Hmm.
and to fight for his life. And he said so he could relate to what those men went through in battle because he's been there.
Yeah, I can just only imagine just some of the crazy stuff. I mean, think obviously any sort of battle and war is just terrible, but at least today, in regards of comparison to some of that, prehistoric and historical battling is definitely different. I mean, if you're able to, well, snipe somebody and dispose of them from, well, a distance away, it is a lot different than if you were like hand to hand back in like the medieval time, like some Braveheart stuff. That's just insanity. I mean, like you said, blacking out and just going berserk. Well, there had to have been a point in time where somebody, unfortunately, even though it was their buddy behind them, they just turned around and disposed of them as well because they were just straight up going berserk mode.
Oh yeah, the times were much different back then. We fight different types of wars these days, for the most part, and sometimes that just means embodying something like a dog man, okay, like a werewolf or a dog or something, to get you through that fight. I guess. I guess that's the moral of the story, if there is
Right.
one. Yeah.
No, it is straight up gnarly, like you said. Well, I do appreciate you again coming to hang out with all of us tonight and once again bringing some really cool information and helping to try to bring some clarity to Well, just the madness that's occurring out there because a lot of people want to close a blind eye. So it is really important to definitely get the information out there. So I appreciate you as always, my friend.
Well, hey, it's always fun hanging out. I appreciate you letting me come hang out with you tonight.
Thank you for everyone who once again stopped by tonight for this episode of Midnight Lycanthropy here on Star Fox Radio. If you do enjoy my content, please like, comment, subscribe, and share it. Feed the algorithm, and I will see you very soon.